Moms have always had a strong presence in animated movies, and Pixar is no exception. In celebration of Mother's Day, we decided that it would be a good idea to determine which mom from Pixar is the most good.
Just think in a couple of days, we're gonna be parents.
Hey guys, I'm Brad with Wicked Binge, and this is Pixar Moms, good to most good. For this list, we'll be ranking based on the relationship between these mothers and their children. Moms that perform heroics will gain a higher ranking, and those that aren't much of an influence in the protagonist's story or were part of the major conflict will gain a lower spot. We'll be starting with the least good and working our way down. Our least good mother is Renata Linguini. Since she passed on before the events of Ratatouille, we felt it didn't make sense to place her higher. She still deserves a mention because it was her letters that got her son a job at Gusteau's and revealed that Linguini was the chef's son and heir to Gusteau's culinary empire. Renata had been concerned about how her son would succeed when she passed on and wanted to ensure that he had a place he can turn to. After all, Linguini expressed to Remy that he had been fired from every job he ever had. But Renata was confident that her son could at least make it as a garbage boy in his father's restaurant. Next on our list is Miguel's mother from Coco, Luisa Rivera. Like much of the family, she tried to talk to Miguel about following the family and joining the business.
Be back by lunch, mijo.
She scolded Miguel about not listening to the family rules and was not initially supportive of the idea of Miguel hiding his love of music from the family. Following Luisa is another mother figure from Coco, Elena Rivera. Addressed as an abuelita during the movie, she ensured the family stuck with the rule of no music that she herself had been raised with.
No music!
She was strict, but also loving and protective. There's also a few people that can brandish a sandal at a man and have him back away in fear while at the same time cooing over the innocence of her grandson.
You keep away from him!
The reason we place her lower is because of her overreaction when discovering Miguel's collection of Ernesto's music and merchandise. Seeing her smash that guitar into pieces was hard to watch, but we know that she thought it was coming from a good place. Family was the foundation she based her life off of. She had grown up with the stories of a man who abandoned her mother to be a musician and didn't want to see more heartbreak. We aren't going to rank her as someone evil because she was touched seeing Miguel reach through to Mama Coco in his own way. And Coco having recognition of her surroundings again was enough to get Elena to see that music didn't have to be something that split the family apart. It could also bring them together. Next, from A Bug's Life, we have the Queen. Mother to Princess Ada and Dot, she's laid back, considering her status in the colony. She was a glass half full type aunt and tried giving her daughter Ada peace of mind when it came to the air training.
Just be confident, dear. You'll be fine.
The Queen only had one moment where she displayed anger, and that was when it was exposed that Flick had been lying about the so-called warriors they'd been counting on. She didn't see the colony as a gathering of servants under her command. She saw them as a family that had to work together to keep Hopper from destroying what little way of life they still preserved. Next, we have Arlo's mother from The Good Dinosaur, Mama Ida. Some could argue that she didn't have as much influence as her late husband, but we have to disagree. She also believed in a life of hard work with everyone pitching in their fair share and praised her kids when they went above and beyond.
Good job, Libby.
When she lost her husband to a mudslide, she supported the farm as much as she could, working herself into the ground. Though Arlo blamed himself for his father's passing, Ida was never cold or distant. Instead, she was proud he was trying to take on more responsibilities to make sure the family would make it through the winter.
You're a good son.
When Arlo returned, Ida was the first to see him and celebrate his return, before insisting he place his mark with the rest of the family. Taking our next spot is Riley's mom, Jill Anderson. Since Inside Out was mainly from Riley's perspective and the emotions she held, we simply know her as Mom for the story. But we do get an insight as to how Jill thinks of her daughter and husband. Jill is a patient woman who is rarely ever angered. Though she can be exhausted with her husband now and then, she always gently coaxes him towards the right direction in order to keep peace around Riley. When her daughter begins to act unusual, she's concerned and tries to lift Riley's spirits by trying to get her daughter involved in the activities Riley normally loved, like signing her up for ice hockey tryouts. After Riley returns home, Jill expresses her own sadness for being uprooted, and we can't forget the way she thanked Riley for staying their happy girl through all the stress of moving.
You've stayed our happy girl.
It wasn't until afterwards, when Riley broke down, claiming she couldn't be the happy little girl during these hard times, that Jill found another way to comfort her daughter. But with Jill's leading emotion being sadness, we have all the confidence that she understood the struggle her child was dealing with.
Did you guys pick up on that?
Next on our list is Andy's mom and the original Pixar mother, Jennifer Davis. From the very beginning of the Toy Story franchise, she's a loving and stable parent.
What would you say to dinner at, Pizza Planet?
She raised her two kids on her own and supported Andy's imagination. Even as Andy grew, she made sure to keep his childhood memories safe. Though there was a horrible mix-up, she would never intentionally throw out the toys that Andy had grown to love over the years. Not to mention, she tried to stop Woody from being taken in the second movie.
I'm sorry, it's an old family toy.
How many times in sitcoms had a beloved toy been sold off by accident only for that person to cover their own butt? But Jennifer wasn't going to make that mistake, instead locking up Woody with the money. It wasn't as if she could have expected the lunatic to pry open the box when her back was turned. We've already featured Coco once on this list, but we couldn't leave out Mama Imelda, the mother of Mama Coco. Her legacy set the livelihood and traditions for Miguel's family. After having her heart broken by Hector and feeling betrayed about having to raise their daughter alone, she forbid anything relating to music in her home. But she wasn't a bitter woman motivated by spite. She was a single mother who was going to make sure her child would be supported and that the family would have some way to take care of itself, establishing the shoemaking business that lived long after she did. She reveals to Miguel that she and Hector chose different paths and that she had to make the choice she thought would be best for her daughter.
I want nothing to do with you.
In the end, Imelda decided to allow her anger towards Hector not to get in the way of Miguel's happiness, and came around to the idea of helping to get Hector's picture home so their daughter could remember him. Next is a mother from one of the newest Pixar films, Libba Gardner. Libba was Joe's only parent after his father passed away. Though Libba acknowledged her son's talent with music, she hated him trying to land gig after gig, and instead tried to convince Joe to take the full-time music teaching position the school offered. When 22 inhabits Joe's body, we learned that the family relied on Libba as Joe grew up, with his father unable to support them as a musician.
You didn't see how tough being a musician was on your father.
She didn't want her son to choose the same difficult path her late husband did, and fought hard with him to find a way to be able to take care of himself when she was no longer around. But that didn't mean she wasn't proud of him. Libba gifted Joe his father's suit and cheered him on during his first show, making sure he knew she would still be there, whatever path he chose. Taking our next spot is one of the more tragic rankings, Coral from Finding Nemo. Her death had been traumatic for Marlin and upsetting for so many young viewers, but there's no denying the bravery that Coral displayed when trying to protect her young. It's a cruel fact in both the animated world and the real world that the young are often the defenseless casualties when predators are on the hunt. Though Coral wasn't able to save more than one of her many offspring, the fact that she fought for them at all was nothing short of impressive. She isn't a biological parent, but we feel we have to mention Dory. Without even knowing Nemo, she aided Marlin on his search, and when she ran into Nemo, she dragged him to his father to be sure that they were reunited. In the second film, she and Nemo have grown close, and she was a protective and playful role in his life, always looking out for his safety and well-being, while also making sure Marlin didn't panic about leaving Nemo to explore things on his own. Dory says that she saw Marlin and Nemo as close to her as her own parents.
Guess I missed the rest of my family too much, huh?
It's never explicitly said that she and Marlin become a couple, but even without that, Dory filled a motherly role that Nemo wanted in his life. Following Dory is her mother, Jenny. Along with her husband, she spent every waking moment trying to help Dory find ways to live a safe and fulfilling life with her short-term memory. We see through Dory's memories that Jenny had worried about her daughter's safety when she and Charlie would no longer be around to protect her.
I think she can make it on her own.
And when the families reunited, Jenny and Charlie had stayed in place and laid out countless shells, hoping to see their daughter again. Jenny's one of the most committed mothers in animation. She never lost hope of seeing Dory again and praised her daughter for finding her way back to them in her own way. Our bronze medal goes to Queen Eleanor. Though she had a strained relationship with Merida for much of the movie, she was always trying to think of her daughter's future. We give her a slightly lower ranking since she wasn't willing to hear out Merida's fears about being married, but don't have it in us to send her to a lower spot.
Merida, this is what you've been preparing for your whole life.
This story takes place in a different time, when setting up marriages was far more accepted.
Merida, it's marriage, it's not the end of the world.
As the story progresses, Eleanor is able to better understand her daughter by mending the distance that had been growing between them. There might be some that insist she deserves to be placed lower due to her insistence to marry Merida off, paired with her destroying Merida's bow in a fit of anger. But we've already established in previous lists that the princess was a self-centered brat that didn't need to assume the worst of her mother. And Eleanor gets hero points for protecting her daughter from the feared Mordu, slamming the cursed prince into a pillar until he was crushed. We're giving the silver medal of good to Laurel Lightfoot. From the beginning, she's attentive of her sons. She approaches everything with a good sense of humor, declaring war should Barley not keep his game pieces picked up, and flipping him when he challenges her to show off her growing strength.
Barley, keep your soldiers off my land!
Since the boys were still struggling with their father not being around, she tried to be patient with them when it came to having them adjust to their new stepfather. When Ian and Barley were in danger, seeking a way to see their father again and gain closure, Laurel broke the law to get the Manticore's help and took on a cursed dragon of concrete and metal to protect her sons. Laurel proved herself to have a warrior spirit, which is saying something since she didn't have any proper training, only relying on what experience she gained from her home workout routines. Finally, taking the gold medal of good is Mrs. Incredible Helen Parr. A former super, she was more committed to taking on a civilian life than her husband. She would argue with Bob about giving up a life of hero work, claiming that they needed to put the lives of their children first. Time and again, Helen protected her kids from danger. From an exploding plane, to violent henchmen, to a super hunting robot, she wasn't gonna let anything happen to them. However, Helen isn't perfect. In her fighting to protect her kids, she hurts their confidence when it came to using their powers. Helen was determined to make sure that her children wouldn't be held in the crossfire, but that meant making them live in fear of being exposed and holding their abilities back. That wasn't an irrational fear, but it caused conflict in their home. Any conflict that Helen may have caused with her and Bob disagreeing doesn't change the fact that Helen was no nonsense when telling her kids the dangers of the world. One of the most memorable moments in the first film is when Helen is telling them not to let the henchmen catch them because they would be killed.
They will kill you if they get the chance.
That's a difficult thing to tell your children, but Helen knew they couldn't afford to sugarcoat the truth. Alright guys, what do you think? Who is the most good mother from the Pixar universe? Let us know in the comment section. Don't forget to hit that notification bell and binge our Good to Evil playlist, where we break down the morality of the characters in your favorite cartoons, shows, and movies. But most importantly, stay wicked.